Welcome to the non-dual lectionary for the fifth Sunday after Epiphany, year A. And last week we started with the Sermon on the Mount. We had the Beatitudes. And so this week the gospel lesson continues the Sermon on the Mount. So let's jump to it. It's still Matthew, and it is chapter 15, chapter 5 still, verses 13 through 20. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. People do not light a lamp and put it under the bushel basket. Rather, they put it on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. So, just a couple points that jump out to me. We've obviously got Jesus's teacher here, right? And speaking in front of everyone. The salt and light, a lot has been made about this, and the traditional view of just, the point is to do good works, right? Salt, and light, the point is not to hide them, or if it, and not to lose its saltiness, but to go out there and do the things. Um, I think, great. That's wonderful. But I do want to, I think there's like a pretty cool actual little interaction with what I would call the non-dual recognition here. And it's something about living in the world, but it's also a teaching itself. And that on the teaching side, one of the things that the Eastern religions do really well, right, is this emphasis on non-attachment, right? Because I mean, there's a lot of becauses, but one kind of straightforward point here is the extent to which we cling to anything is the extent to which um, we're not quite living out or not quite recognizing true nature, right? If our true nature really is not non-dual, right? Meaning not a small self against the rest of the world, but truly, a recognition of no self, of living life, of being a living of life, then what comes with that is non-attachment, right? And so there's like a back and there's like an arrow pointing each way, right? Where non-attachment can be its own practice. Although a self that attempts to not attach is already attached to the notion of non-attachment, right? That's Alan Watts has a great point about that, right? And so the point there is that it's still fruitful, right? To like realize you can't do it, um, but also to kind of till the field along the way, right? And also again, the recognition points back at itself. So a full, or full manifestation of recognition kind of brings with it non-attachment. So looking back at this passage here then, right? Like the metaphors of salt and light, I think are really beautiful in that context because um they don't point at, not you are building the organization of the world, right? Not you are to establish a church in the world, not you are supposed to build a political movement in the world. All the things that right, like salt and light by their nature also like embody this non-attachment in a way, right? So if you're living out salt in the world or light in the world, you're simply seasoning, you're simply illuminating, and not trying to establish a lamp store, Right? Uh, um, it, so I think there's something really beautiful underneath there, about, right, about these metaphors that if the not that a person living as salt and light can't establish a church, right? But to hold that so lightly because the point is not the establishment. The point is not, um, to build the thing, right? It's to be the salt and the light, which, again, I think like really lends itself to that non-attached way of being. And then the second part, just, we can see this as kind of separate, but, we've now built on the Beatitudes and that point about salt and light. And then here, and I think in that context in particular, there's something beautiful here, right? About I did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And just that point, I mean, we could read a lot into I think there's a lot of points we could glean out of this passage here, but just that point I want to focus on for now, which is just the message. Like one thing you can take away there is like, what's the point of all this? And all this here being like the law and the tradition, and it gets called law, but all the things to do, right? And the tradition to remember, and the people that have come before, and following the right commandments and all that. Like, what's the point, right? And um, and what Jesus says is not, he says not to abolish but to fulfill, but also like not one letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished, right? So like the point being like, hey, this is all to point you towards this, right? Um, and getting rid of it is its own trap, right? A lot of us have done that in spiritual seeking circles, right? Of like, oh, the problem was my old belief system, right? And if I can replace it with a new belief system, then I've got the whole thing. But that's its own trap, right? And so the message here being something like, hey, the point of all this, right? What it's pointing towards, like, is recognition, recognizing true nature. It is like the fulfillment of all of it is that live, that recognition and then living it out. And so, just that little point there of, where did all that come from? All these beatitudes that are building on all the commandments, that are building on all the prophets, all the messages there. And, you can wind yourself up into, I got to follow all these rules and then I'll get X, right? And that's most of traditional religion, not just traditional Christianity. But here, we've just got the point of like, hey, yeah, this is all important stuff, but it's all pointing towards fulfillment, whatever that means, right? And I think we do have a sense of what that means from everything else that he said. Um, so yeah, I mean, people living out their lives, and we've got Jesus as teacher here of, how to live out their lives, how to live, as best as along the way, right? Like both in the fulfillment at the end, but also along the way, the practices along the way and tilling the soil, ever more in accordance with true nature, with what is, so that we can actually recognize and manifest ourselves just as what is all along the way. And in the end, look back and go, ha, it was there all along.